the janitor who knew 8 languages, silenced the entire boardroom, and changed everything. The conference room on the 34th floor of Nexus Global Holdings had never felt this cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from air conditioning, the kind that settles in when millions of dollars are slipping through your fingers and there's nothing you can do to stop it. 12 professional interpreters had already tried. 12 had failed. The deal, a $480 million merger between Nexus Global and the powerful Changwei consortium out of southern China, had been 3 years in the making. 3 years of emails, flights, background checks, legal reviews, and careful relationship building. 3 years of Margaret Holt, CEO of Nexus Global Holdings, pouring her reputation into this single agreement. And now it was dying in a conference room on a Tuesday afternoon because nobody in the building could properly speak the language of the people sitting across the table. Ms. Yuan, lead negotiator for Changwei, sharp as a blade and twice as precise, had crossed her arms exactly 22 minutes ago. Her 2 senior advisors had leaned back in their chairs. Their body language was clear even without translation. We are done being patient. The problem was dialect. Ms. Yuan's team spoke a rare hybrid, formal Mandarin, layered with a Cantonese-based regional business, dialect specific to Guangdong, province's older merchant families. It carried specific tonal patterns, honorific structures, and industry terminology that standard Mandarin interpreters simply didn't carry in their toolbox. The first 3 translators Nexus had hired were Mandarin certified, competent professionals, but they kept hitting walls, moments where Ms. Yuan would say something and the translation that came back didn't land right, and Ms. Yuan's expression would tighten just slightly, and everyone could feel another layer of trust evaporating. By the 7th interpreter, Ms. Yuan had stopped speaking altogether. By the 12th, she had requested a recess and hadn't come back to the table. Margaret Holt stood near the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline, her green dress still perfect, her posture still professional, but her jaw set in the way. Her assistant had learned to recognize, as we are in serious trouble. She turned to her head of international affairs, a well-dressed man named Preston, who had cost the company a great deal of money, and was currently offering very little in return. "I don't care what it takes," she said quietly. "Find me someone who can speak this language. Not corporate Mandarin, not textbook Cantonese. Someone who actually knows these people, their culture, their way of speaking. I need a human being, Preston, not a credential." Preston nodded and disappeared. Down on the 6th floor, Marcus Davis was mopping the hallway outside the executive bathroom. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above him. The cleaning cart smelled like pine and bleach. His blue maintenance uniform had his name stitched in red thread above the left pocket on Marcus, and his work boots had a small scuff on the left toe that he hadn't had time to polish because this morning, like every morning, had been a sprint. Wake up at 5:45, make breakfast for 2, pack lunches, braid Lily's hair. She was very particular about her braids now, ever since her best friend at school showed her a new style. Help Amara find her science project, which had been hiding under the couch. Leave the apartment by 7:10, drop both girls at school. By 7:30, catch the 7:42 bus. Clock in at Nexus Global by 8:09. Every single day. Marcus Davis was 34 years old, single father, 2 daughters, Amara, who was 9 and already reading chapter books that impressed her teachers, and Lily, who was 6 and had recently decided that purple was the only acceptable color for anything. He raised them alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in the south side of Chicago. He cooked their meals, attended their school events, helped with homework, and then, after they were asleep, he would sometimes sit at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and old language, textbooks, and just to keep his mind sharp, because Marcus Davis had a secret that this building had never bothered to discover. He spoke 8 languages: English, his first; Spanish, learned from his grandmother's neighborhood in Miami; French, studied formally in high school and college; Arabic, picked up during 2 summers, volunteering with an international literacy program in Jordan; Mandarin, studied intensively during college, driven by a fascination with East Asian economic history; Cantonese, acquired through years of immersion; Japanese, self-taught over 3 years. With the discipline of a man who genuinely loved the structure of language, and a regional Chinese business dialect specific to Guangdong province. Mastered during the 3 years he lived and worked there as a volunteer language teacher in a rural district outside Guangzhou. He had a bachelor's degree in linguistics from the University of Michigan. He had once been accepted to a graduate program at Georgetown. He had, for a brief and promising window of time, been exactly the kind of person that companies like Nexus Global paid very large salaries to employ. Then life happened. His wife left when Lily was 4 months old. No warning, no fight, just a note and an empty closet. The money dried up fast. The job applications went out. 200 of them over 8 months. And what came back was mostly silence, and occasionally a rejection, email that didn't explain why a man with a linguistics degree in international field experience wasn't worth a phone call. He moved back to Chicago. He took what was available. He kept his daughters fed, clothed, and loved. He kept his head down, and he pushed the cleaning cart down the 6th-floor hallway and told himself, not for the first time, that this was temporary. Daniel from HR found him at 2:17 p.m. Daniel was young, maybe 27, and he was half running, half walking in the way that people do when something urgent is happening and they don't want to appear to be panicking. His tie was loosened. There was a faint coffee stain on his left cuff. Marcus looked up from the mop. "I know this sounds strange," Daniel said, catching his breath. "And I know I'm probably going to look crazy in about 30 seconds. But do you speak Cantonese?" Marcus blinked. "Because I overheard you once, like 6 months ago, on your lunch break on a phone call. And it sounded like, I don't speak it, but it sounded like..." "Yes," Marcus said. "I speak Cantonese." Daniel stared at him. "And Mandarin?" "Yes." "What about a regional dialect? Like Southern China, older business community style?" Marcus set the mop handle gently against the wall. "Guangdong province," he said. 3 years. I taught there." Daniel looked like a man who had just found water in a desert. "Marcus, I need you to come upstairs. Right now. Like, right now. There is a $480 million deal that is about to fall apart because we cannot communicate with these people. And you might be the only person in this building who can help." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He thought about Amara's school shoes, a size too small now. Had been for 3 weeks. He thought about the electric bill on his kitchen counter. He thought about the graduate school acceptance letter he still kept in a folder in his closet, not as a trophy but as a reminder that he had once been seen. "Let me wash my hands," he said. The elevator ride to the 34th floor was silent. Daniel kept glancing at Marcus like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Marcus stood straight, his uniform still on, his name still stitched in red thread above his pocket. When the conference room doors opened, the reaction was immediate. 12 people turned to look. Executives in tailored suits, legal team members with thick binders, Ms. Yuan and her 2 advisors, who had returned to the table at the request of the Nexus team but had not yet committed to staying. Margaret Holt's eyes moved from Daniel to Marcus, and back to Daniel, with an expression that could have meant many things. She chose her words carefully. "Is this..." "Trust me," Daniel said quietly. Marcus walked to the center of the room. He didn't look at the executives. He looked at Ms. Yuan. He made brief, respectful eye contact. He placed his hands at his sides, not in his pockets, not crossed, open and calm. And then, in a tone that was neither performative nor hesitant, he spoke. In the exact dialect, with the exact tonal patterns, with the honorific framing that Ms. Yuan's merchant class background would recognize as both respectful and peer level. He said, "I apologize that today has been frustrating. I believe the American team genuinely wants this partnership, but I think several things have been lost between what was meant and what was heard. If you are willing, I would like to help bridge that, not to take anyone's side, only to make sure both sides are truly speaking to each other." The room was completely silent. Ms. Yuan looked at Marcus for a long moment. She looked at his uniform. She looked back at his face. And then she said in the same dialect, "Where did you learn to speak like this?" "Guangdong province," Marcus said. "A small district outside Guangzhou. I taught English to children there for 3 years. The families were very patient with my learning." A faint smile crossed Ms. Yuan's face. She uncrossed her arms. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Sit," she said. "Let us begin again." What followed was unlike anything the Nexus boardroom had ever witnessed. For the next 2 hours and 17 minutes, Marcus Davis stood and sat and moved through that negotiation, like a skilled conductor switching between English and the Guangdong dialect seamlessly, reading the room in both directions, catching not just the words but the weight behind them. He identified 3 major misunderstandings that had been compounding for days. One involved the equity distribution structure. The Nexus team had presented it in a format that, in Ms. Yuan's cultural framework, implied distrust rather than standard legal caution. Another involved a clause about decision-making timelines that had accidentally communicated disrespect for the Changwei leadership hierarchy. A third was subtler, a phrase the Nexus legal team kept using that, in the regional dialect, carried a connotation of conditional commitment, exactly the opposite of what they intended. Marcus corrected each one, carefully, without embarrassing either side. He reframed, explained, softened, and clarified with the instinct of someone who had spent years understanding that language is never just words. It is relationship, history, and trust made audible. He suggested a restructured equity framework, not a change to the terms, just a different way of presenting them, that immediately shifted the atmosphere in the room. By the time Ms. Yuan stood to conclude the session, she reached across the table, not toward Preston, not toward the legal team, not toward Margaret Holt, and extended her hand to Marcus. "This man," she said in English, "understands us. We will only proceed if he remains part of this process." The room exhaled like a building finally released from pressure. Margaret Holt looked at Marcus Davis for a long, full moment. The kind of look that happens when a person realizes they've been walking past something extraordinary every day without seeing it. She pulled out a chair at the executive table, the long polished table with the leather chairs and the crystal water glasses, and she said simply, "Sit down, Marcus. I think we have a great deal to talk about." He sat, and for the first time in 4 years, Marcus Davis was sitting at the table, not cleaning beside it, not invisible near it. At it, 2 weeks of conversations followed. Background checks, skills assessments, multiple meetings with HR and the executive team. Marcus was honest through all of it, about his degree, his experience, his years in China, his gap in employment, his daughters, his circumstances. He didn't apologize for any of it. Margaret Holt didn't ask him to. The offer came on a Thursday morning. Director of International Communications, a newly created role built specifically around what Marcus brought to the table. The salary was 4 times his current earnings. He negotiated, calmly and confidently in English. He got full tuition coverage for both daughters through college, annual language and cultural immersion travel stipends, a flexible schedule structured around school, pick up at 3:30 p.m., and an office on the 34th, the floor with a window that looked out over the same Chicago skyline he had always seen from the street below. The Friday he accepted the offer, Marcus picked up Amara and Lily from school exactly on time. They went to the pizza place, the real one, the good one on Michigan Avenue, that they passed every few weeks and the girls always pointed at, and Marcus always said, "Maybe next time." Today was next time. Lily ate 3 slices and got sauce on her purple shirt and didn't care at all. Amara asked her father approximately 40 questions about what his new job would be like, and Marcus answered every single one. As they were leaving, Amara slipped her hand into his. "Daddy," she said, "did something really good happen?" Marcus looked down at his daughters, these 2 small, brilliant, loud, wonderful human beings for whom he had quietly carried everything for 4 years without complaint. "Yeah, baby," he said, "something really good happened." The $480 million merger between Nexus Global Holdings and the Changwei consortium closed successfully 8 weeks later. It was the largest deal in Nexus Global's history. Ms. Yuan sent a handwritten note to the company afterward. It was addressed not to the CEO, not to the legal team, not to Preston. It was addressed to Marcus. It said in the Guangdong dialect, "The best deals are made between people who truly hear each other. Thank you for hearing us." And on the 34th floor of a building he once cleaned, In an office with a city view and a door with his name on it, Marcus Davis took a call, moving between Japanese and Arabic without pausing, and proved what he had always known and the world had taken too long to see. That talent does not care what uniform you're wearing. That language is power, and power belongs to those who've earned it, and that sometimes the most extraordinary person in the room is the one that everyone forgot to notice.